The Infringement Guise, Part 3. The Great Indebting. Hello again, and welcome to the Rise of the Eco-Guards Stand on Guard with Me channel. In this continuing segment of the Infringement Guise video series, entitled The Great Indebting, I'll delve further into some of what I was leaning towards, but truly did not express much of those interesting perspectives that I did allude to in my recently posted videos, but did not really get extensively into breaking down those thoughts and perceived truths in that previous video entitled Trump Those Threats, Part 2. This is also a revised and better articulated extended version of the first of the Infringement Guise video series, which this is a very much more intense video. But this is now where I'll further and better express my lifelong studies and findings, and my different and limited perspectives of what I see, sense, and feel to be true as it relates to what's transpiring in this recent urgent or catastrophic manufactured political conflict within this country, wherein a great many people in this country have begun to negatively express their thoughts and physically voicing their disrespectful booing of our beloved neighbors to our south and their great national anthem during sporting events, while being provoked by some politicians of ill repute that have now turned into disruptive and hateful people with really bad manners during many events of our national pride, namely our prized national sport of hockey. Something that for a great many years was impossible to believe that our people would do, or even express towards the United States, let alone any president of that great republic. As alluded to in my past videos, that some of our politicians are primarily using this opportunity concerning the many statements of POTUS as statements of fact that they want to create political crisis points over, just to attempt to win the next federal election, and also using those to incite the Canadian peoples into more anger, hate, and divisive manners, and a form of directed manipulated voting, as well as their presumed Team Canada approach, which is truly not occurring, for they only have limited fringe supports. They're conducting manipulated AI exaggerations and false polling results. Nor could it be achieved with those same politicians that caused those very types of divisive actions to take place several years ago during the Truckers' Freedom Convoy, where they attempted to cause such great hatred towards our Canadian brothers and sisters and continue to use great sums of taxpayer dollars to continue to bring such menial legal charges against those that supported those actions, while also locking people up, as well as locking people's bank accounts of those individual Canadian citizens that even dared to support those actions, while still allowing far worse to currently occur in this country by protesters that don't have any of our Canadian values or best interest at stake. Why are they not quelling or suppressing them right now, like they did when they presumably asked the United Nations for those troops to suppress our Canadian peoples in February 2022? That points to something that I'll not get into at this moment, but I'll indicate how they've achieved that knowledge and truly attained that data several years ago, while lying to everyone by stating someone else accessed or hacked that information from those Give, Send, Go, and GoFundMe websites, and then gave it to those questionable publicly paid mainstream media corporations, thereby then giving that to our so-called government. But also now, in controlling their narrative, thereby potentially helping that political party of particular note to use the presumed so-called threats by Mr. Trump or POTUS towards Canada's sovereignty, as is indicated by his remarks about Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States of America. Comprehend what they've done, for they've taken a situation that they directly caused for the last 9 years or so, and the financial hardships that would follow towards our peoples, and redirecting all the anger surrounding those facts towards someone who is attempting at protecting all of North America. It's truly absurd, as I previously stated, and is nothing in comparison to having to face multiple military presence by not so favorable foreign entities or militaries intent on eventually controlling some of our natural assets or resources, waterways within Canada, of what some believe used to be considered sovereign Northern Canadian territory, which it actually still is. Regardless of the facts that our past governance bodies from over 6 decades ago were not inclined to heavily and militarily protect those areas, for those actions could have also been misconstrued as beyond provocative by the USSR back then, As previously indicated, concerning the recently discovered efforts by foreign entities to place some of their police forces and facilities, or in my opinion military boots, on our soil, could be construed as not only a violation of our sovereignty and against the rule-based international laws that Mr. Trudeau so loves to tout, as something that he believes all countries should be observing. But yet, his party violates those all the time. Anyhow, those acts by those foreign entities appear to be similar to an act of war, or at least serious espionage, unless they were invited into our country by those so-called political leaders that have ruined our nation, its reputation, and so much more, that all our peoples must and have had to endure in the last 9 or 10 years. And there is evidence of that fact. But yet we, the people of Canada, are to just stand by and watch as these clearly compromised politicians continue on as if Mr. Trump or the Americans are to blame. But to now state or even think that their political party can even be trusted to act in a manner conducive to the true protection of our once great country is truly beyond dreaming, for this is all done by them in an attempt to prevent their political party from very much disappearing from our political landscape. As previously indicated, I also believe that all of us within North America were being politically played and directly interfered with by many international deep states and occult groups in a multitude of manners of ways, by many other foreign entities for quite some time, and not necessarily those whom you would think. And truly, no thanks to a great many other factors that contributed to further hardships, including the fact that a great many countries have been treated beyond badly in the last few decades, and also financially and physically destroyed and attempted to be heavily controlled for those decades, by not only the American hegemony and deep state, but also those same types of foreign state entities and major international business or corporate conglomerations interests from other foreign countries as well, that all help to manipulate those harmful actions. It's true, and that fact is part of the reason that caused the BRICS nations to rise up as an economic powerhouse, for many of them are sick of being trampled on by powerful military forces, or even financially bullied. That said, as previously indicated, they are attempting at controlling their presumed destiny, and part of that includes not allowing our country of Canada to begin to bring our natural resources to the international marketplace, thereby interfering with their current and future market shares. But anyways, I'm now repeating myself, and that's because I'm really attempting at getting these points across. But that's because I've realized a long time ago a great many things and problems on our horizons. And those concerns started to occur a long time before this current incarnation of the Trudeau Liberal government. I would also like you to make note of this. For a great many decades, since the end of the Second World War, the world looked to Canada and our American friends to protect all our combined countries, democracies, and even some republics. And that was evident when our Canadian brothers and sisters helped to greatly defend China from the Japanese brutal invasion during the Second World War. But they mostly also asked after the Second World War for the United States of America to help police our world's oceans, shipping lanes, and nations. But also by creating the NATO alliance, who have recently lost their way, by encroaching upon other sovereign nations' borders, and no longer represents what their defensive pact in which their constitution implied all those many years ago should have. But also understand, the Americans were the primary peoples and country which paid for all those efforts, including the protections of all those others that have and also had different ideologies and geopolitical goals back then. And because of all such actions, including those of the Marshall Plan, whether negative or positive, the Americans have taken on the things and manners that those many other countries wanted, which eventually caused the great indebting of themselves and their country. And to be blunt, I'm not going to kick them on their way down. In fact, I'll attempt to help them on their way back up, and I believe most Canadians feel the same way, for we are linked in so many ways, including family. That now indicated, I would like everyone to truly comprehend that there is nothing wrong with friendly rivalries, even those types with other countries. For sometimes that's how great industrial, economic, and even balanced innovative eco-based solutions and further futurist progress transpires. For just those facts and the real results and creative outcomes that came out from President John F. Kennedy's inspirational first great inaugural speech, as well as those that followed concerning going to the moon, including those of the Apollo missions to the moon, which many Canadian engineers from the Avro-Aero program had helped the United States accomplish, as well as those from their space shuttle design, which is actually part of what the primary engineer Mr. Jim Floyd from the Avro company had envisioned for his future and later renditions of his Avro-Aero design. Plus the other space missions afterwards, such as the International Space Station, wherein many countries limitedly contributed to all those efforts, Russia and China included, and that's proven those further facts, including that America has been greatly indebted. But also think about all those medical applications and other sciences that have been gained for all of humanity. But also when Mr. Steve Jobs and the Apple company pushed those other companies to do better, such as the once acclaimed Canadian company Research in Motion, now known as BlackBerry. But also includes beneficial political, business, financial, and other worldly unions that don't encroach on our national sovereignties, national laws, and political structures. But there are exceptions to those rules and controlled and limited freedoms, such as they are attempting at doing nowadays, mostly in Europe. At one time in recent history, wars caused such economic potentials and great gains, but has truly not transpired since the end of World War II. But that fact also caused many to believe that forever wars would cause the same types of economic prosperity. But the wars that came and went since World War II have not materialized those so-called potentials, and how could they? When the Second World War ended, America and its allies moved on to rebuilding Judeo-Christian societies and nations. But after the end of those more recent wars, nothing of the sort could transpire, for they could not change those societies and nations, whom had their own societal values, systems, and laws, as well as spiritual or religious values that had been ingrained within their lives for well over 5,000 years, far longer than any American or British, Germanic, or even Roman imperial types of systems. Plus, there were too many unscrupulous companies and individuals stealing those vast resources of funds that many governments allotted to those efforts for their own gains, as is still the case now. But when weapons of mass destruction, or even threats to use those on our neighbors transpires, we put all future generations at risk of mutual assured destruction, and that sword of Damocles that hangs over all our heads may be removed from all their abilities very soon. And that's not a threat. That's what appears to be coming to light as it relates to the future technologies that are appearing within these current conflicts. For within the military mindset, the countermeasures are always less expensive to initiate than the measures themselves. For even I noticed that back in the 1990s, but I've been recently proven to be correct in many ways. Anyways, I still kept my mouth shut, for loose lips sink ships. But sometimes, and depending on circumstances, you just need to stand up and say something to prevent great calamities. That said, when the world noticed how that recently has been achieved, for now drones are being used to take out or destroy one of America's best military ground assets. Namely, their expensive Abrams tanks, for they showed their weak areas during the conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan, and are now using those relatively inexpensive countermeasures in Ukraine. And some of us also previously seen those facts when former President Ronald Reagan initiated the Star Wars program all those many years ago. But then it came to light that the countermeasures of placing a mirror coating on their intercontinental missiles by the Soviet Union could partly and limitedly prevent those United States strategic defense abilities from doing much harm. Anyways, let's get back on track and towards our current and future aspirations. Currently based on many others' beliefs, the United States of America is approximately 35 to 37 trillion in debt, with an approximated untapped natural reserve of resources of about $10 trillion. But that's an assumption based on many economists, actuaries, and evaluators. And I truly don't believe that. Like those found at the Canadian Institute of Actuaries, or CIA for short. So you see, we Canadians even have our own CIA. It's just different, for we try not to truly interfere in other countries. Anyways, my belief is that the state of Alaska alone holds about $100 trillion in untapped natural physical reserves or resources on its own, but that requires a great many years and very much work to get to. And that also includes those natural resources that are quickly and naturally replenished. And now that the 47th President of the United States has played his trump card and opened those resources up to further developments, we'll all start to witness something entirely unique, all on its own. That now indicated, also understand, since this is a given, the USA will need to use those transportation systems that are linked from the state of Alaska through the Yukon, British Columbia, Alberta, to their southern mainland, and goes Canadian and American roads and train systems to get goes raw materials and products to their lower mainland, unless they decide to use cargo ships only. Just making a point, for who is going to pay to repair those roads and track systems within Canada for hauling such heavy cargoes? For those are very destructive towards those road surfaces and track beddings. And if we attempt to prevent them from doing so, not that we would under normal circumstances, but with all the negative rhetoric coming out of Ottawa of late, I would not put anything past those politicians. But that conflict would not fare well for British Columbia. For Mr. Trump kind of already implied such, within a different manner of words. Furthermore, how can the Americans truly pay this debt and possibly bring themselves to a neutral state as their debt's interest heavily climbs, thereby allowing them to remain on top as one of the world's major economic powers and also prevent their peoples from enduring great financial, employment, economic, and personal physical crises? There are several ways. Heavily control your spending and pay your debts. And that's why Mr. Trump hired Mr. Elon Musk to head their newly formed Department of Government Efficiency. Truly something that is so important for their capabilities to efficiently ascertain their out-of-control national debt. And rightfully so. But they are facing pushback and protest, mostly by the Democratic Party and some other unscrupulous groups and individuals. Even though they've already found over $6 trillion in unaccounted waste, and they've only just begun. For they are attempting at saying that Mr. Elon Musk should not have access to their private data. Now, with that said, all the peoples of America, and even here in Canada and elsewhere, truly need to understand none of our private data is private data at all. For the old world order sold access to all of that, to all those companies and conglomerates, as well as anyone else that wanted it, including those several new world orders on the near horizon. And that's been proven by many great computer engineers, computer scientists, programmers, and hackers a great many years ago, when they learned that the Microsoft company and several others that had embedded coding in their operating systems that allowed them to mine all that type of data from anyone's devices that is using their software. Moreover, it's also done within all cell phone or wireless companies as well. Why do you think many countries don't use Microsoft products at all? In fact, they use other more sustainable and secure operating systems, such as those very similar to those that were compromised many years ago by the Central Intelligence Agency when President Obama was in office, and he loved his BlackBerry device that they could not break the coding on. And they then turned and wanted that encryption coding from a Canadian company like those used by Research in Motion or BlackBerry products. Anyways, now you know part of the reasons for all the political distractive tactics that everyone is being bombarded with to keep you from caring about all the real facts and issues that truly affects all your lives. But I'll say this, we need something very much similar to the Department of Government Efficiency in this country, but with greater authorities. Although I understand we have auditor generals and groups such as public accounts that are supposed to do that, they are ineffective, for they can only make recommendations and advise any prime minister. But when a prime minister refuses to properly act towards the benefit of his peoples, then the onus falls on the people of our country to stand and vote that government down. But also comprehend, when a sitting government acts in this manner, as this current liberal government is acting, to prevent those actions by whatever means, such as media publicly paid for manipulative propaganda, including the incitement of great anger towards the very person that's trying to save his country, as well as our democracy. That's truly not all right, and needs to be called out for what it is, suppression and manipulation of the people's will, or an overbearing dictatorship and worse. But also uses the political tensions which are going on within North America against its own peoples to convince them that his liberal government are the only ones that can take on that big baddie just south of our border, when in fact, that Trudeau government has caused those major economic and everyday living crises throughout our lands that we had to increasingly endure over the last 9 years. Something has to give, or we may face something far worse, from internal forces or possibly external forces. Now, think about why Mr. Trump indicates in many of his televised interviews why Canada would be a cherished state in the event we join in their union. I'm sure that would be the case, for we would be the place and peoples that's directly responsible for the elimination of their debts. When I believe the world, but also primarily the European nations, as well as also including many in the Asian Pacific countries, actually owes the Americans that much anyways, and their national debt should truly be forgiven by all, including the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, or anyone else that holds those debts in whatever form. Now, there's a type of great reset that would truly change the world and put things back on a proper manner of dealing with all. For without the past actions and great indebting that transpired towards the United States of America, a great many conflicts would have occurred during all those decades since the end of World War II. And this world would be a much different place, and not necessarily for the better. But in the event that the world does not forgive their debts, which I'm actually calling for their national debts to be forgiven by all international entities, the untapped natural resources of Canada alone have the ability for the Americans to do this quickly without completely destroying the state of Alaska's ecosystems. And that's why I'm assuming, based on what I've witnessed, Mr. Trump and Canadian businessmen like Mr. Kevin O'Leary are pushing for our country to become the 51st state of the United States Republic. Now, with those things indicated, I'll leave off at this point, for even this video is getting a bit long, and I'll ask that you join me next time for the upcoming video in this series, entitled The Infringement Guise, Part 4, The Greater North 63rd.